Richard Burns Rally has been noted as being one of the best rally simulators of all time. This is interesting because when it was originally launched, it was not received very well in the marketplace. In fact, the company that created it is completely defunct, completely out of business now. So if you want to actually buy a copy of Richard Burns Rally, you have to go to used outlets like eBay and other such things. But it's got a huge following and a huge community. And RallySimFans created a plugin that makes it easy for downloading and installing all the bits you need to get up and running with Richard Burns Rally, including several very cool plugins that make it a more modern title than people might expect of a title that was created in 2004. So I'm not going to be able to provide you with the comprehensive engineering level, insightful, interesting video on Richard Burns Rally. I haven't been using it that long myself, but I can give you some hints and tips to get you up and running, learn how to navigate the tools, learn how to navigate RallySimFans site, and get you online and rallying in almost no time at all. If you want more in-depth coverage on any of the topics that we're going to go through in this short series, I definitely suggest that you look up Richard Burns Rally on YouTube and find all sorts of people, including Jake at GP Laps, Yane, who is a big rallyist, and several others that are really, really able to talk to the great depths that Richard Burns Rally has available to you to get really, really deep into it. So if that's your thing, rally geek away and have some fun. I'll put some links in the description of the video. But for now, strap in, let's go for a ride. So downloading and installing the RallySimFans plugin and getting everything you need to get up and running with Richard Burns Rally starts at the RallySimFans site. So rallysimfans.hu is the site, and that's where we're going to go here. And you can see I'm already on the page. First thing you want to do is actually create an account if you don't already have one. If you have one, you can go over here to the left-hand navigation. You have login, you can put in your login credentials. If you do not yet have an account, you can click on register. When you click on register, you are asked for a username, an email address, and a password, and enter your real name and then where you're from. And then you register, and you'll get confirmation via email, and the account will be all set up. You can then come back and log in to the site. Now that we've got an account and we're logged in, we can go to the download section. In the download section, it's got pretty detailed instructions that may seem intimidating at first, but it's a little more straightforward than it might seem. You've got actually two sections here. One is for new RSF installations. The other is to update an existing RSF installation. And you still need the torrent for updates, but the process is just slightly different. So we're assuming, for the sake of this video, that you need to do a new RSF installation. So you want to download the RSF installer files, v4 torrent file, or whatever version is current as the time you're downloading it. And then you want to open your favorite torrent client app. Now, I recognize that most of you have never used torrent, or if you have, it was a very long time ago. That was the same for me. I looked here and went, this should be interesting. But this guide assumes that you're going to have Qubit torrent, and that even gives you the URL. And this is a site that you can download. It's a open source tool, so it costs nothing. And you can go to the download page and download the version that is for your version of Windows. Windows 10, Windows 11, so it's all the same version. Download this and install it. And it creates a client that you can open up and run here. And again, this looks more complicated than it is, but we'll get back to that in just one second. So what we're going to do here is read through the rest of this just really quickly. We're going to add the torrent after we download it to that Qubit torrent app. We're going to set a save at file location for the added RSF installer files. And we're going to accept the new Qubit torrent by pressing OK. And after a few minutes, it's going to show that it's downloading. So once the installer torrent has shown 100% complete, you can proceed with the RallySimFans installer application. And then you kind of go through that. So we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to download the torrent file, and the RallySimFans installer, just so that we have them both. What we're going to do is we're going to put them in a directory that I've created on my system on my D drive. I created a directory games and Richard Burns Rally demo and downloaded the files. I actually put them in their own directory just to keep them separate from everything else. So I have the torrent and installer in the directory here. So now what I need to do that I've downloaded those files is I want to go to my Qubit torrent application here. I want to add, and I'm going to find my games, demo, torrent, and installer. Click on the torrent, and it's going to ask me where I want to save it at. So this is going to be that games folder that I chose before. So we're going to go up a level, games, RBR demo. Okay. And it's going to remember that path, and it's going to pull in all of these files. So I'm going to click OK. And you can see here the status on this is going along. Now this is going to take a little bit of while. So just know that once you've actually downloaded everything and you have everything installed, including the torrent install files that you're pulling down via the torrent file, it's going to occupy about 130 gigabytes of space on a hard drive. If you don't have that kind of space, you're probably going to have some problems. So just know that going in. So while the last few bits download, thought I'd answer a question that you may have been asking yourself is why are they using torrent client to distribute their software? Well, popular streamer Jimmy Broadbent several years back did a video on Richard Burns Rally and the RallySimFans plugin, and he basically took down their servers. Well, he didn't personally. By virtue of the popularity of his video and the clicks that resulted from that, he took down their server. And they decided that they were going to use a solution path that is kind of in their DNA, which is lean on the community, which is what a torrent file does, is it distributes the load across multiple clients so that no one computer is responsible for the entire download. It's kind of a nice approach. And that's the beauty of the torrent file. So you can see we finished the download, and it's 31.56 gigabytes in total, and it took us 24 minutes to download it. I have a pretty fast network, but that's about reasonable, I would think. So now that we have the file, what are we going to do with it? Well, let's go ahead and close down our client because we've got actually what we needed. And if we look here in our directory, we now have this directory RSF installer files. And here's our 31.5 gigs of data. Cool. So now we go back to our installer, and this is where the instructions will help us. So we'll go back into this directory, and let's just go to the instructions really quickly again. So when it shows 100%, download the RallySimFans installer, which we've already done. And then we're going to run the installer and select the installation language, which I'm going to select English, and then set the RSF destination folder, which is the game destination that we actually put the installer files in as well. And then we're going to set the source for the installer files folder. So it's basically just sort of telling it where things are going to be installed and where it's getting those installation files from. And then we're going to choose the type of installation and proceed with the installation. So let's do that. Let's go back here, RallySimFans installer, double click on that, and it's going to ask us the language, which is English. And then it's going to tell us what it's going to do next. So here it is, RallySimFans is not compatible with Czech. So it's got Czech and French plugins it's not compatible with. You have to have internet access to run the installer, although we downloaded the files. And it's saying do not install the application under program files or program files x86 or your user directory, documents, desktop, downloads, etc., or in C program. And you don't want to use special characters, etc. So read those instructions carefully, follow them to the T, and then it gives you some background on what's in the different versions of the plugin and the installation. And okay, a lot of stuff to read. We're not going to read all of it. But one of the things that's actually kind of nice here is that in this document, they give credit to everyone that's worked on this project. So this is a very community, open source kind of mentality in terms of making sure that the people that do the work in the community get the credit that they deserve for doing that work. So it's a tremendous act of generosity and openness, and it's what makes this community so special. So we're going to click next, and we're going to browse to our folder here because we put it in games. We're going to put it in that folder, and I already have it installed, so I'm not actually going to go through the entire installation here, but this actually gives us the destination location for the files, and then it asks where we're going to find those files. You want to actually select that proper destination, which is games, installer files, where we put it, right? So this is where we're installing it, and this is where those installer files are. And once we've done that, we click next, and then it's going to ask us the installation type. And so here it is best to do the full installation type. This will install the Richard Burns Rally base game, the original maps, any custom maps, and required and recommended add-on plugins, and recommended extra graphics and audio content. All of this stuff is stuff that you want, but if you want to actually do something different, you can go to a custom installation and select the things that you actually want to install or don't want to install. And once you've done that, you click next, and the default choice here is fine. Go there, and here we get the ability to select components. You can actually get various co-driver mods for the pacenote plugin and download those, or you can download those separately. And you can walk through and just sort of look to see everything we're getting here, all the different maps, all the rally maps. There are, I believe, 360 some odd now total that are included. And they also have some test maps that they're actually working on that aren't quite ready yet, but you can download them if you wanted to. And then once you actually select that, go next, choose your co-driver language, which English is a good choice there, and then go next. And then it's going to ask us for different plugins. The pacenote plugin you absolutely want. RBR HUD is quite nice for overlays. Gauges, good. RBR HUD overlays, 2D digidashes, and other sorts of things. If you want to do VR, there's VR support here for Open RBR VR, and they have several other mods here. I actually have the triples plugin as well. So true triple monitor support is a good thing if you have triples, but if you don't have triples, you don't need it. Everything that's default, pretty good here. You definitely want the Fmod sounds, very, very cool sounds. And you can download or not the Gauger plugin. This is actually a nice plugin, but has largely been replaced by the RBR HUD. So you don't definitively need it. You can replace the built-in Richard Burns Rally Countdown with a plugin that is quite useful. But again, you don't have to download that. You can rely on what's already built into the game. And then you have the other runtime libraries that you might want to install. If you don't already have them installed, it causes no harm to select them. And create a RallySimFans Launcher desktop. This is definitely, you want this on your desktop so that you can launch it. You can also do a game desktop shortcut, but you don't need it if you have the RallySimFans Launcher on your desktop. And then you go next. Are you sure you want to proceed with the cleanup of obsolete old RSF stage and install versions? May take up to 40 to 60 minutes. And you'll say yes, and it will go and do the install work. I'm not going to go through the install because I've already got this installed on my machine. So I'm going to stop this and cancel it and let you go on through there. But again, it's not very detailed. There's a lot of detail in there, But as far as what you need, the defaults are pretty safe to accept. And then you can see what's unchecked and decide for yourself if you want to install like VR support, triple support, other sort of ancillary pieces. They're not absolutely required, and you can always come back to the installer and install them later. So that's been downloading and installing Richard Burns Rally from the RallySimFans site, getting this RallySimFans plugin and creating your RallySimFans account. Pretty straightforward stuff, and it happened fairly quickly. The install actually takes a little bit of time, but not horribly long. As I said, you're going to need about 130 gigabytes of total space, including that 31.5 gigabytes that we downloaded for the installer files. As long as you're set to go, should be pretty straightforward. Good luck. All right, we're going to get familiar now with the RallySimFans Launcher, which a shortcut to it should be on your desktop if you followed the instructions in the previous video for downloading and installing Richard Burns Rally and the RallySimFans plugin, and of course creating your account. Now, the first thing we're looking at here is under Settings, RallySimFans. That account that we created, we definitely want to put those credentials in here. And we want to select Auto Log into RSF Web so that when you launch Richard Burns Rally, you're immediately connected to the back end for RallySimFans. And that gives you access to online rallies and other sorts of things and automatically downloading things. If you somehow have forgotten your password, you can click here to reset your password. If you've not yet registered, which you should have already, you can click on this link and it'll take you to the web page where you can go through that process. Now, a couple of things that I actually have turned on here, I think were defaults. Auto navigate to RallySimFans. So Richard Burns Rally has a whole bunch of interesting things. Like it's got the original game menu overlay, and then the plugin, which has its own set of menus that look and act and feel a great deal like the original menus. But you need access to those to actually set up things like modern controllers and the sounds and other sorts of things. All the plugins that are associated with RallySimFans all are managed through that RallySimFans plugin and the navigation menus that are given to you by checking that box. And you want to show it in the main menu. I like the transparent menu. You don't have to use it, but it looks nice. And then the other things that you can do, you can override the RBR driver name. By default, the game shows a profile name, and this is basically allowing you to set a custom driver name for the get ready start line message. You don't have to do this, but if you do it, it may look nicer. I minimize the launcher on RBR startup. I keep Richard Burns Rally alive in the background. One of the things that used to be a problem with Richard Burns Rally is if you alt-tabbed out of the application, it would crash. And that's not good. They've fixed that. So now you have the option to either pause the game when you alt-tab away from it or keep it running in the background. There are numerous reasons why you might want to do that. I like it, so that's what I have checked here. I also hide the get ready message at the start line. This basically allows for the RBR HUD to manage. Actually, there's a RBR countdown plugin that I use instead of the traditional RBR get ready. And so it's got a little description. If you notice that if you hover over anything, it gives you the explanation of what these things are. And so I use this RBR HUD plugin as an alternative. Hide, press escape for assistance. I don't like messages in games. It takes away from the immersion. So usually when you get into a situation where you've wrecked the car, etc., the default game would pop up and say, hey, press escape to ask for help or, do what you need to do. You can suppress that message. So, if you play in the game, you just know it's there. So that's why I have that hidden. I also don't like wrong way messages because sometimes I'm going the wrong way on purpose. Not always, but most of the time. So I hide my wrong way messages. I also override race result messages during replays. And I use the enhanced Fmod car engine sounds. Absolutely yes. All good stuff. Pacenotes. So you actually have pacenotes that are installed already as part of the installation, and you can also have variations on these pacenotes that you can create yourself or edit or do whatever. You can access all those pacenotes through here, which is kind of nice. You can also point to an entirely different location for pacenotes. So if you've downloaded a new pack, you can point to that new pack and make things work that way. My replays, this is where you can actually access all the replays from past rally stages that you've driven. And what's kind of nice here is that it associates the replays with the rally that you drove and the date, etc. Now, the reason why this is important is that for some online championships, occasionally you may be asked to provide the replay file to prove that you actually performed an amazing alien-like drive of a particular stage. It's not very common that that's actually requested of you, but occasionally, like any other game, there are people that will cheat, and there are telltale signs in the replay files if you're doing that, and they can suss you out. So these replay files, if you're competing in an official rally of any sort, it's good to keep them around, but you don't have to keep the ones that are your practice sessions, etc., around for any length of time unless you just really, really liked your run and want to keep them. But you can access those. You can select one, click on play. It will launch the game and automatically launch you into the replay, which is kind of nice. Screen and graphics, normal fare here. I am using triple screen, so I have triple screen selected up here on the left-hand nav bar. And so it's got my resolution here. And I'm using the Vulkan graphics mode, gives you some instructions on the do's and don'ts around that, and what works best for NVIDIA versus AMD graphics cards. So some good guidance there. Anti-aliasing, you can do what makes sense here. I think I've got it on the highest setting, and you can manage versions there as well. Using the default gaming monitor, car stage ping. So it's got the different instructions here. I'm using the car name, stage name, ping when it captures a screenshot. Press F11 to capture screenshots if you're in a replay, or in gameplay, I guess it would also work. You have options for VSync, track IR. You can show an FPS counter if you want to see what kind of performance you're getting from the engine as you're playing through. And then, of course, you've got graphics quality settings for render, BTB render quality, particle quality, qubit environment maps, render. I have mine turned on high, so that's all good. And I followed the instructions and the suggestions for the different things here as we kind of go along based on my hardware and my capabilities here. You can select use virtual reality headset. You can also turn virtual reality on up here. And then for the triple screen settings, because I've got triple screens enabled, it basically does the configuration option for this. And you can use NVIDIA Surround, but you do not need to manage beyond that. So this single screen or NVIDIA Surround is, you'll check here and it will actually manage the screens separately. But since I've got triples enabled, I don't need to mess with that. All good stuff. Cockpit and dashboard. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. So this is for display, your Digidash, your HUDs, etc. You know what you want: kph, miles per hour, Fahrenheit or Celsius, on-screen visual steering rotation, which I left at a default. I'm not really sure I care about that. Most of the cars are anywhere from 900 degrees to, I think, 1020. You can actually turn off shaking on the internal camera, which I've not done. I probably should do, so I'm going to apply that change. And then you can set your FOV cam value. Now, there is, this is an override. You do not have to do the override here. You can actually set this in your camera settings in the game, which we'll go through in a subsequent video. But you can also override that for all your cams so that you have the same consistent FOV set. I actually need to adjust it. It's actually a little higher than it needs to be. But there are two calculators here, AndyFs and Dynex 86. And I use the Dynex 86 FOV calculator. It's really nice because you can tell it, the aspect ratio, the number of screens you're using, the bezel width, all the stuff that you need to submit to get a good FOV calculation. It does the math for you based on how far you are from the screen and all that kind of good stuff, and then gives you your FOV calculation. Very, very useful and very, very helpful in terms of getting a realistic feel and sense of speed in the game. Cockpit style in racing and replay, you can actually do all sorts of stuff, like you can hide or show the steering wheel in racing, in replay. So you got two choices here. Wipers, same thing. Windscreen, Digidash. I actually do not use the Digidash. I rely again on the RBR HUD for all of my stuff. I also have the gauger plugin disabled for the same reason, and I'm showing the RBR gauges and overlays. I show in racing mode. I do not show them in replay mode, and everything else I hide. I auto hide the unit Digidash warning icons, and I use different Digidash positions for 2D and VR. That was a default, I think, selected, and I just didn't change it. All good stuff. Controls. So I would actually leave some of this alone until you actually go through controls in the game, and we will talk about that in a subsequent video. But good to know that this is where you can actually select the inversion. Depending upon how your hardware is detected, you may have to invert it. 3, 2, 1, countdown paused. I hate being rushed. So when I'm in a stage, I like to tell the starter that I'm ready to go, ready for the countdown to start. And so you can do that in a number of ways. First, you have to have this checkbox checked, and you can pull the handbrake 30% if you have a handbrake. If you don't have a handbrake, you can press the pause key. Default is the 7 key. I don't know why. And the other is by default the escape key. Again, escape basically gets you to the menu of the game, but it also, if you're in the timer thing, if you just hit the escape key, it will automatically start the timer for you and start the stage. And then you get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, and you're on your way. I did not change this default. This is the same. Same with auto hide mouse pointer. That's the default. It's probably a good thing. Same with pause freeze frame mode. I do not even know what that is. I could read. Nice. Now I know what that is. However, that's the default right there. You do want to use force feedback effects and parallel FFB effects. This is interesting and bears additional commentary as we get a little further in, but I'm using a SemiCube 2 Pro for my wheel, and I am using 100% force in my true dive configuration, and in the game, you need to have the force feedback turned all the way up in order for it to register correctly. And so this is where you control the strength of that in game. And this is, again, all of this is a front end to a bunch of INI files that control how the game behaves. This is a sweet spot that I found that works for me. You may find other values that work best for you based on your wheel, and there are a lot of resources online that you can look up if you're having problems getting a good feel in your force feedback. Definitely use that. You've got configuration for dead zone and force threshold as well here. You can set to adjust your steering wheel range per car or not, depending upon your desire. And of course, you got different protocols and details around setting that up. Shouldn't need to do too much there. I think that this was the default when I installed it. There are tips and docs available, and so this is quite useful. It's got all sorts of links to different places that you can actually get additional information and welcome tips, etc. I have advanced here. So I've got my cars and different things that I can actually do here in terms of skin upload and apply and do different things. I'm going to do a different video on how to manage skins and how to upload them and put them in place, and what you need to do in the launcher in order to get them to be seen by the game. Telemetry, I've not actually touched. It's not enabled, so no worries. And then all of our plugins. And so I mentioned that I have the Gauger plugin downloaded, but I do not have it enabled. There are a whole bunch of other really cool plugins. One of my favorites, Director's Cut, gives you a cinematic camera capability in your replay, so you can do some pretty neat things and capture some nice screen captures. I already told you about the triples capability. The pacenotes, enhanced pacenotes, very, very cool in terms of how you can manage that in game. And it's same way you access camera settings, FOV, is with mouse clicks inside the game. Kind of nice. Controls. This is actually very, very nice in that you get a H pattern shifter and some other sort of cool stuff by virtue of this plugin. The RBR countdown I already talked a little bit about. RBR HUD I've already talked a little bit about. I don't really know what the RBR RX does, except that I think it fixes some things around some stages and some sounds and some other sorts of things. And then the RallySimFans online plugin itself is enabled there. Nice to know. The other thing that I actually like to know about the launcher here is that there's a backup button. You can actually click that and it will go through and actually back up all of your cool stuff. If you've made customizations to your plugin configurations, you've updated any of your overlays, all of that is captured in that backup so that you can access those files and restore them if something goes horribly haywire in your installation. So that's the RSF RBR launcher. The last thing that remains that makes this so cool is that you've got a launch RBR up here in the upper left-hand corner. And we're going to go ahead and do that because the next video is all about RBR basic navigation, controller configuration, and setting up your first practice. So that'll be exciting. We'll do that. So RBR, basic navigation, controller configuration, and setting up your first practice. Well, first of all, the menu system is a little bit obtuse. What I mean by obtuse, it's old. It's from 2004, and not a lot of changes have been made to it, except in some of the plugins and how they operate. So the way in which you navigate the menu, it's not mouse driven. You can't click on anything, which, okay, well, that kind of sucks. But your arrow keys work for you. So you can move up and down with the up and down arrow keys, and you can select things with the left and right arrow keys. So it's pretty straightforward. And if you've been around for a while and been using computers and playing games on them for a while, it's going to feel fairly familiar fairly quickly. You'll get the hang of it. If it's something that you weren't doing in 2004, chances are good it's going to feel a little weird at first, but it does get easier as you kind of go through. So the first thing we're going to do, this is we just launched into RBR from our RSF launcher. And here you can see that we are in the RallySimFans plugin menu. This is the menu that you're going to operate in most of the time when you're trying to get into a rally. There's some really interesting things here, but we're going to come back to them in just a second. What we're going to do first is we're going to hit escape to go back a menu. And these are the main options that we want to actually go through really quickly. So the main options, screen options, this is the Digidash. I told you that I have mine turned off. You can actually control a lot of things on this here, including the size. Not all Digidashes support minimized view, but you can, or minimal view, but you can download a whole bunch and play around with them. I think there are a bunch in the package. I actually do not use the Digidash because I like the RBR HUD elements a little bit better, at least for me. This one actually took me a while to find. Checkpoint times. As you're driving along and you cross some marker for the first third, second third of the stage, by default, checkpoint times are turned on. And so it'll display on screen and give you your checkpoint times. I don't like that so much. It breaks the immersion for me. And worse than that is they show up when you're playing back a replay. And that just doesn't look very good in a replay because you're looking at the car and you're trying to do something cinematic and exciting. And then your checkpoint time pops up. It's just irritating. So I have mine turned off. You can do what you like. If you like those popping up, definitely leave them in the default turned on position. Come into audio. Audio, by default, the engine sound volume and all the stuff is turned up. And the Fmod creators suggest that you keep the settings the way they were. As you can see, I've actually modified my engine sound volume to be lower to manage a whole bunch of things in my audio configuration that are more complex than I care to get into. I'm happy with the sounds and the engine sound volume, the way that it works. The one that you will want to adjust is your co-driver sound volume, because you want to make sure you can hear your co-driver as they're speaking the instructions as you kind of go through. Effects, you might want to adjust slightly, but again, the Fmod engineers that developed for this game certainly have their preset suggestions that are the defaults, and by and large, you can probably keep them. I turn music volume off because I stream and I record and I don't like to get into trouble. Tire volume, great. Replay music volume, I've turned off. And in-car sounds, force in-car sounds, I've turned, I think it was off by default. So I don't think I actually changed that. And that's fine. That's all you need to know about audio effects. Controls. This is fun stuff. Controller setup. So if you come in and you don't have to worry about redetect devices or reset to default, if you come into controller setup, this is where you're going to come in and clean house through most of it. And what you want to do is when you click on steering, you want to make sure you move your device around so that you're actually getting movement in the steering. And you want to make note of if it's going the right way or not, right? Same with your throttle, your brakes, your clutch, if you have a handbrake, all of these things you can actually set up. The other thing that you can do as well is you can set gear up, gear down, and all of these gears. If you have an H pattern shifter, this isn't where you want to do that. Get your steering, get your throttle, get your brake, get your handbrake, your clutch, all of that configured. That's order one. If you want to be able to change cameras, you'll want to set up a key there, or at least note what the default is. And if you want to be able to pause the game for whatever reason, make note of that or set it to something that is maybe a button on your wheel, etc. So we're going to escape this. Now, the thing to note about controller setup is if you want these things to stick before you go back into the other menus, is you need to save your settings. We're going to go a little bit further here and just sort of take a look at a couple of other things first, though. Pace notes. Pace notes. So if you actually turn visual pace notes off here, all you're going to get is audio. You also have an in-game clock. You have checkpoint times, 3D pace notes. 3D pace notes are actually kind of interesting. So if you're doing visual 2D pace notes at the top, you can also do 3D pace notes that stack on the right-hand side of the screen, as I am told, and it will give you like the next 4 or so calls. The pace note stack is basically specifying how many notes to stack, so that you get a little bit of a preview of what's coming. I'm an immersion guy. I like the power of, and I'll tell you why, the power of the audio only. It allows me to drive the car and be visually cued specifically on driving the car and listening to my co-driver give me instructions. And that is a better way to drive rally because it allows you to focus on driving the car and kind of forming that mental picture rather than in the midst of a complex turn. The worst possible thing you can possibly do is look up and try to read or interpret pictures as to what's coming up next. But you can do, the checkpoint times can be turned on. All sorts of other things can be turned on here as well. I just don't like to mess with that. The one thing that you will want to change here based on your driving style and what car you're driving is call out distance, so that that happens closer to or further back from a turn. And so the further out, the more you're going to get stacked calls that you're going to have to remember, and the closer you're going to have to be able to respond as quickly as possible. So if you're in a super fast car, you may need to adjust that distance out a little bit further than in a slower car where you can have it right up on the turn and make your decision there. You can select language here. Be mindful of the fact that some of the pace note voice packs that you can download that are not included in the RallySimFans download may require specific language choice here in order to function, even though they may be in English or language of your choice. I've not experienced that. All of the language packs that I have used, including Darren, I'm using Rita Full-On currently with the Lupus pacenotes, working out really well for me, and I'll provide links to that when we get to the pacenotes section. But all of them use English just fine. And gears. So default gears, you want to be in manual. And I think that this was on by default. Prevents the driver from changing down to neutral by mistake. So if you are using paddle shifters especially, you may not want to go into neutral as you're shifting down. So neutral lock actually makes sense. I'm using the H pattern shifter in the car that I'm currently focused on, so this does not really apply to me. Gear protection and clutch help are off. Now, one of the things that's of note, I just watched a video that told me that clutch isn't expressly required to shift gears in Richard Burns Rally. Now, of course, if you have clutch, it will use that as inputs and you can manage your gears and stuff, and it works fine. But if you don't have a clutch, don't worry. You don't need one. If you have an H pattern shifter and no clutch, you can drive. If you don't have an H pattern shifter and no clutch, you can just use paddles to shift. But if you're in any online competition, any championships, you're gonna want to be in default gear manual. You do not want to use the auto gear capability that is built into RBR. You do have the ability here to reset to default settings. You don't want to do that typically, but it's there for you nonetheless. And then of course we have our plugins configurations, and this is where you can do all sorts of interesting stuff, including RBR controls, which is where I actually have some interesting stuff set up here. My H pattern shifter is set up here, and so it's a different plugin. So remember, I showed you in controllers where you can actually define gears there, but I have not. I've actually set my shifting here to where I have my H pattern shifter is fully configured, as is my sequential. So my paddle shifts or my sequential shifting actually works just great. Absolutely love that, and makes things nice and easy in terms of the modern hardware. Other plugins, I mentioned RBR HUD. RBR HUD comes up with a screen here. You can get to this also by pressing F4 in the game. And this is a weird one because, you know, typically you're navigating by way of your arrow keys and your keyboard. This is the type of thing, along with pacenotes and camera controls, that you can actually manage with your mouse, which is kind of nice. So we can actually open up and actually define new overlays, which is kind of nice. If we want to actually create a whole new overlay for our race, we can actually do that. And we'll talk about that in a subsequent video. So other things of note in the RallySimFans plugin menu system are time trial, which is exactly what it sounds like, hot lap rank, so you can go out and drive stages trying to hot lap and to compete against people around the world. Kind of cool. And then there's the online rally section, which we will dive into at greater length in a subsequent video. A couple of other things that are interesting here, though, is that in options, you can do all sorts of things. You want to have auto login selected. I think that's set up by default. You can have show splits turned on or off, splits by class on or off, and determine the number of splits actually shown. Automatically download car setups, which is very, very useful. As the community releases new cars and new setups for those cars, you can automatically get those, and download the FMod sound banks automatically for cars, and that's kind of nice. You can restore cars that have been busted, etc. You can set auto gear, which is a no-no. In championships especially, don't set that. You should always be doing gears by manual, either by paddle shift, sequential shifter, or H pattern shifting. 3, 2, 1 countdown is paused. Car slot, ignore. This was a requirement in the original Richard Burns Rally. There were a limited number of car slots that you could define the cars that you were going to drive. It's unlimited now, so ignore that. So that's kind of nice, and you can save these options once you change them. So one of the things I mentioned that we want to actually do here, exit out, escape, escape. You've changed your settings. Do you want to save your profile now? So anytime you make changes to your controllers, to any part of the configuration, you want to escape out until you're asked this question, and you want to say yes, so that it actually saves your configuration and it's there for you the next time you get into the rally. Very, very cool. So that is getting configured. Now, one of the things that we actually want to do here is getting into our first practice. We can actually come down here. Navigation for practice is actually pretty straightforward. You can actually select a stage, and if you hit enter on the stage there, you can actually find all of the stages. I find this to be really useful, as if I want to find a snow stage, I can select snow and pull out the different snow here. You can see that we get in our right-hand side a nice little rally map, the country that it's in, its length, the surface, and the author, which is kind of nice. If we actually look at the yellow ones, I don't know. That's a BTB. So that's a Bob's Track Builder track that has been incorporated into Richard Burns Rally. There are a whole bunch of settings for any track that you're actually going to drive, and championships and other sorts of competitions will set the wear, the wetness, the weather, and the weather sky to create the environment that you're going to drive in. And so when you're practicing, you may have to look at your road book for that particular rally and determine how the admin is going to be setting up the rally for the stage that you're going to be practicing on. So this is where you can actually come in here, look at stage wear. The options are new, normal, worn. For wetness, of course, there's dry, damp, and wet, and weather, good or bad. So you wanted a wet road, you wanted the bad weather, and you wanted light cloud, light rain. So you have a lot of choices here in terms of the time of day, the uh, the sky, whether it's raining or not, whether it's foggy or not. All of these things are very, very cool in terms of being able to select different skies, and it's kind of nice. Now, what you may have noticed here is that as I change the weather sky from like morning, partly cloudy, hazy, it's good weather and the wetness is dry. If I go to something that's light rain, notice the weather changed to bad and the wetness changed to wet. So these things are kind of nice. If you look at how the admin set the weather sky, the other two settings are automatically selected for you appropriately. Now, when you come in here and you want to select a car, you can come in here and select a car by virtue of looking at all of them, or looking at a car in a particular class. Or once you've actually found a car that you actually like, let's say you like the Porsche 911 SC 3.0 Group 4 car, you can use the space bar to put a little asterisk next to it. And then when you come in here and you go to your favorites, your favorite cars are listed here in the dropdown. Makes it a little bit easier and quicker if you're driving the same car over and over again, or you have a particular set of rally championships that you're competing in, and you want to keep your cars nice and tight and accessible that way. This is my favorite car, just so you know. Car state. This is nice if you are going to be driving a bunch of stages in a leg, and the tire choice is something that you only get to make for the first stage. So let's say you've got a bunch of stages that are stacked up, and progressively as you go through the stages, you may want to have it reuse car and tires between stages, reuse tires, always new. The whole car state and the tires are always new when you start a new stage. So that's kind of a nice thing to have as a capability to practice. Damage, realistic. We actually have a couple of different modes here. Damage off, which I don't know. Actually, it makes Richard Burns Rally a lot more accessible because you can have an off and you don't have to pay the consequences. Safe, I believe, is just moderate damage, so on and so forth. Reduced It's not quite as intense as full damage, but it's still, you pay a price for having offs and damaging the car. Realistic is really cool, and actually the full weight of RBR comes into effect with the damage model. I set it realistic because the things that would damage a car in real life will damage your car in the sim. And the things that can get damaged are really interesting. The radiator. Well, Porsche 911s air cooled. Why do you have a radiator? The same model for damage is used for all cars in Richard Burns Rally, and it's the Subaru Impreza is the base fundamental. But you can actually extend that in your mind. Most racing Porsches, even air-cooled ones, had an oil cooler up front that was a radiator that would be, behind the grille. And so that's kind of how I try to think that and, maintain um, the illusion and the immersion of driving in the sim. But there are all sorts of things that can get damaged. If you head into a tree in a Porsche, typically you wouldn't damage the engine, but with this particular model you do. So the suspension of disbelief is a thing, and you definitely need to do that in this. But the idea here is the realistic model is tremendously good. You can damage the gearbox, you can damage the drive line, you can damage the clutch. And the clutch actually behaves as you would expect. Instead of just not working, it slips, which is really cool. So a lot of really cool things in terms of a very complex damage model that make it a very immersive sim and very, very amazingly realistic. Very cool. You have four choices in, no, you have 7 choices in tires: tarmac dry, intermediate wet, gravel dry, intermediate wet, and snow studded tires. I love them. They're very, very cool. Setups. There are several very cool setups that are included in the download for Rally Sim fans. You have the defaults, which are also, you have the default, and then you have the D gravel, D snow, D tarmac. Those are the default sets. And then you'll occasionally see setups from some of the luminary drivers in Rally Sim fans driving. Cubits is actually one of the support guys on the Rally Sim fans Discord site, and make some really nice setups for the Porsche. So you do have options for setups. So when you're actually setting up a rally, you'll note that you have a stage where you can select tires, or a tire set is selected for you. And sometimes you can change that. And also sometimes you can change the setup. In some stages, you have to keep the previous. And so you got to make note of those things and plan accordingly, so that when you're driving your rally, that you're making the plans to do the right thing in terms of setup and tire based on the opportunity to make changes as you're going through the various stages of the legs of your rally. Very cool. Last thing that I'll show you, I know very, very little about, so you'll have to dig in deeper, is edit car setup. But you do have all sorts of capabilities here in terms of setting up the car, the differential, suspension, tires, brakes, gears, all that stuff. And you can load in settings from different places. You can customize and save settings. So once you've actually set things up the way you want, you can start the stage. And that's just, again, pressing enter, and then it loads in. And that's where we're going to leave this one, because the next video, we're going to actually talk about accessing your camera settings, and that'll be fun. So we'll look forward to that. So now we're going to talk about the all-important getting your camera settings just right and setting your field of view. And before we dive into the configuration within the game, what we want to do first is actually look at a cool tool, dynex86.github.io/F O V-C calculator. This opens up a cool little configuration thing where you can set your screen ratio, the size in inches of your screen, and the distance to the screen, and then whether or not you're using triple or single screens, and the bezel thickness of those. If you're using a curved screen, the radius of the curve. And then you basically get all the different FOV settings across all the different games and applications that you might want to be using. And so in this case, we actually have Richard Burns Rally, and this is the FOV setting that we need to record. So write that down somewhere, or have your screen open and copy paste. It's probably better to write it down because of the analog nature of the game configuration. But nonetheless, you want to make note of this configuration, whatever it is for your particular screen configuration. But nice way to get that. Once you have it, you can get into game here. Here we are back in Richard Burns Rally. Now, because I have the nice pause set up, I don't have to worry about the pressure of the countdown ticking in my head. If you right mouse click twice, you get the internal camera set up. And this is useful right here because we can actually select the camera. By default, it will probably have your bonnet cam. You can certainly set this with the proper FOV if you wanted to do that, and then readjust the seating position. The reason you might want to do that is by default in Richard Burns Rally, the internal cam had head motion set up as a default, and the bonnet cam does not. And so using this is actually kind of useful if you don't want to move around, especially if you're using triples, etc. You could actually set your FOV and move things around and get that to work. I prefer to use the internal camera, and there is a setting now for turning off the camera motion with the internal camera. And so internal camera will place you inside the car, which is good place to start. And then you can set your FOV. And this is, again, that number that I got from the calculator to populate that in. And then after you do that, you can adjust all sorts of things here, like your left and right. You can go up and down, and then, of course, back and forward based on what you want to be seeing in terms of the car. I usually like to position myself to where the gauges are perfect for what I want to see, and I might see a little bit of the side mirror, but that's about perfect in terms of what I want to see. And then you click Save to save that configuration. Very useful. Other thing that's in this menu that's kind of nice to just sort of know about is that you have your replay speed settings here for when you're playing a replay. You can select whether or not to show the HUD in replay mode, and that's kind of nice. You can also mute replay pace notes. I've got that checked, so when you're in a replay, you don't have to hear the co-driver talk through the replay. Very, very useful. You have some telemetry configuration here as well. But save your camera settings, and then we'll move on. The other thing that's kind of nice to know about replay is if you double left mouse click, this is the pace notes setup here. And if you're in a replay, this is where you can actually pause your replay. You can also do things that are really, really cool in terms of positioning the car. So turn that off. If you pause it, you can actually change where the car is in a replay to be further back, etc. And then, start unpause it, and it'll relocate the car on the road where you want it to be, so you can capture a particular segment or rewatch something again. Kind of useful to know that that exists. There's also some really cool stuff here in terms of showing the car damage. If you open that up and you've got car damage, you actually get a full listing of all the damage. And so the damage stuff will show up at the top, which is quite convenient, and how badly damaged it is will also show here. And so if you need that, you can pause the game and pop this up and get access to that. It's quite useful. We'll talk about pace notes in a subsequent video. But that's accessing your camera settings and setting your FOV. Pretty straightforward, easy to do, and something that's absolutely necessary for proper feeling of speed and driving and hitting your turns right. The next thing we're actually talking about is accessing and modifying overlays. All right, accessing and modifying overlays is pretty straightforward in Richard Burns Rally. You press the F4 key, and it will bring up the RRB HUD tool that we can then use to do all sorts of cool stuff. So right now we are in pre-race mode because I haven't actually started the timer. And so this is the pre-race HUD that we're actually looking at. And so if we actually want to see what this overlay looks like, we can open up the overlay editor. And so these are all the overlays that are enabled in my setup. And so I can add new ones. If I want to move one or add one, so let's actually just add one for giggles here, add the no hide version of it. So here it is. And so it's up in the upper left-hand corner, and I can move my mouse and my F1 key and move it where I want. So if I want to actually see a different damage model, I use the honeycomb one. It's down here that basically doesn't give me body damage, but gives me critical damage that I actually might care about, but quite useful. And you can actually move this by virtue of your X and Y coordinates here, where, like I said, you can just move it with the F1 key to a different location. You can also resize it. So the scale is here, so we can actually make it much smaller if we want to, which is kind of nice. And so then we can actually move it over here next to this one. We can make it even smaller because, you know, just one little tiny one. Um, you can also control some cool stuff as far as like opacity. So if you want it to be more or less opaque, so you can see through it, that's kind of nice, kind of cool. So you have a lot of control over the overlay elements. You can also set a transition in, transition out. So when the pre-screen loads, we could have it fade in. When the race screen loads, we could have it transition out so that it's not always visible. Um, there are some other options here, so you can have no fade. So if in your next scene that same element is present, you don't have a fade in, fade out sort of situation, but it makes it kind of nice to where you can do all sorts of really cool things. And what I actually like a lot here are some of the default things. Like you have the default countdown, the honeycomb, you have a digidash that you can add, a digidash gear only. I'm using the digidash Imperial that is right here. That's this element here, because I want to see my speed in miles per hour and my temperature. I don't mind if it's in Celsius, but I want to see my miles per hour. I have a tire configuration here, and I also have inputs that's over here. So you'll note that some of my digital elements, when you load yours in, will be white. I've actually added some color to mine. I actually modified the INIs of the elements themselves and changed some colors around just because I wanted to, and that was useful. If you don't want an element, you can just remove it, and you can save and overwrite your existing overlay you're doing here, or you can save as and create a new one. Reason why that's kind of interesting is that if we come in here for pre-race, in-race, and post-race, we can actually pull a drop down here and add in the different setup that we actually want. And so that's quite nice to be able to customize the HUD the way you want to have it set up, to where you'll notice that I've got elements that do things like keep my name, the car, and the stage that I'm on always present with the timer. When the stage ends, the timer final time is shown center screen, and this one disappears. I have my digidas and my inputs down here, and some interesting information. My tires go away after the stage, the pre-race overlay, but I keep my damage present on the screen so I can actually see it all the time, and you can see it as I'm driving. Again, I record and stream, right? I enlarged this because I liked the look of it, kind of taking the whole right-hand side here. This is the drive line, and it's typically broken up into thirds, so you can kind of see as you go past the different markers as you're progressing along, but you get a sense of how far along the full stage path you are, and it's kind of nice to see. Some people make that really small on the upper right hand side, but I liked it kind of big to where just sort of it's obvious and big and huge, and it's always on. And that's for me, may not be for you. But you can customize that and do some really interesting stuff there. Didn't used to have gauges in Richard Burns Rally, and so by virtue of the RBR HUD, you now have moving gauges that actually work throughout the game, and that's really cool. So that's accessing and modifying overlays. Next thing we're going to be talking about is accessing and editing pace notes, because pace notes are a big part of Rally, and we'll talk more about that in the next video. So accessing pace notes, kind of a fun thing. If you double left click, you can pull up the menu for your pace notes. You can also open up additional pace notes. So you can read from a file. It'll actually ask you where that file is, and you can find it and get that. That's kind of nice. As I mentioned earlier, you can see the location of the car currently, and you can pause the video If you're doing a replay, reposition the car and unpause, and it will relocate it. In the pace notes, though, what we want to see here is we can actually go through the entire set of pace notes here, and we can actually click a call, and maybe we've just found something that we want to edit. We can come in here and edit, and you have all of your cool things here in terms of corners, all the different corner types, modifiers, links, numbers, different tightens settings, opens, adjectives that you may want to use in terms of giving yourself clues on a turn. So even if there's a missing note here, you can add one in here, which is super, super cool. Additional things, gets faster, plus, plus, past junction, etc. As you're getting prepared to drive a rally, very often the default pace notes that you have, even if you have a pack like Lupus's set, which is very, very good, there may be things that confuse or that you need as a reminder for a certain turn or something that got you in a previous run of that particular stage. You can add additional calls or modify existing ones to adjust to your style of driving and what you need to hear to remember the stage or make the right decision as you're driving. And this is unlike just about any other rally game that I've ever encountered. Most rally games have a static set of calls, and you just have to live with them. And this is very much attuned to the realities of rally driving in real life, where you perform a recce or reconnaissance and get a sense of the road and even customize your own notes. Now, that is definitely an undertaking that is less beginner and more advanced in terms of sim rally driving, but this supports it. So while you can download notes from someone else and make use of those for now, and can edit those to make the calls custom to what you actually need to hear, at some stage down the road, you may find that you're faster if you actually do a full reconnaissance run and record all of your notes from scratch. And there are some really cool tools that make that accessible in a way beyond just having to manually do it in this particular tool. Linking video to an editor that allows you to kind of walk through and create that. Some very cool stuff. Lots and lots of options in here in terms of adding additional context around the road, the line, obstacles, objects, cautions, driving. So giving you suggestions of a big dab, handbrake, all sorts of really, really cool stuff. Locators, so giving you clues as to what visually may actually clue you in to what's coming up next. Different prepositions to kind of link different things together, and service calls. All extremely cool stuff. Very, very useful from the standpoint of getting you comprehensive audible view of the road before you're actually having to drive it. And that's the art of rally, is learning how to listen to your co-driver and to have prepared your notes effectively to make yourself as fast as you possibly can make yourself for a particular stage. Very exciting stuff, and a big part of what makes Richard Burns Rally and Rally Sim fans so very, very special. Next thing we're going to look at is navigating the RallySimFans site and finding online rallies, and talking about the types of rallies and legs and stages and what the difference of those two things are as we kind of get into how we're going to compete. Look forward to that. All right, we're back in Richard Burns Rally with the RallySimFans plugin and looking at how to navigate online rallies. Now, you may have noticed the very tantalizing online rally menu option under the RallySimFans plugin menu. And that is what you're going to do to join a rally and drive it. We're going to go in here really quickly. So once you've actually loaded the online rallies, you're going to see a whole bunch of stages here, and they're actually color coded, and the colors do have meaning. The light blue ones are daily stages that are put up on the site, and Laka is one of the administrators of RallySimFans. The purple or darker blue are championship rallies. So these are rallies that are defined as part of a larger championship, and they have different types of rules and different sorts of things. The red are password protected. And so if you're part of a league or part of another organization, or even just want to put up a private um, set of stages that you want only a group of friends to be able to participate with, you would create a rally in the online rally creation tool on the website, and you would password protect it so that other people could not encroach on your little kingdom, as it were. The green ones are all open, and this is kind of cool. There are rallies that are defined by people, different communities that welcome anybody that wants to come in, and there's some pretty cool rallies in here. There's one group that I actually have been driving with a little bit, and that's the Flyby Rally Club. Flyby Rally Club has some really interesting stuff here. Paradox is the administrator of this league, and they produce two weekly rallies. One's the survival one, and one is the club, just general. Both are realistic. Both have limited pace notes, which means audio only, so no visual pace notes, and a lot of people will do that. Normal means that it's open to anything. The number of stages is always articulated here, and the number of legs, which the total is 3, and you see that it's listing 1 of 3. So it's telling me that I'm either in leg 1 or haven't started the rally yet, so would be in leg 1 if I drop into this. It also tells me when this rally ends. So all competition has to be done for this particular rally by January 8th at 23:59 UTC. Important to note that when you're looking at it from this particular lens, all times are in UTC time zone. So you have to translate that. I think that for California, that is, well, 3:59 or 15:59, as it were, in Pacific time. So you have to do that translation automatically to just know when the rally ends. You can actually drill into the rally and actually see some information about it here. So we see that we've got 9 stages and 3 legs. So what does that mean? Well, a leg is I guess you would say it's a day in a rally. In a real life rally, you have rallies that consist of multiple days, and you do different stages within that day. And then, you repair the car or you sleep, whatever, move to the next location, and then you do the next day of rally, which is a bunch of other stages. And so that's how this is formulated, is that you have legs. And once you start a leg, you have to go through and complete that leg. You're allowed 30 minutes by virtue of the RallySimFans plugin. It will time you because you're logged in, you're connected online. So if you take longer than 30 minutes to start the next stage after starting a leg of a rally, you basically get retired from that leg. And what that means can mean anything from complete retirement from the rally, or if something called super rallies is supported for the rally, then basically gives you a default penalty time for any incomplete stage in that leg, and then allows you to continue normally in the subsequent legs. So that's nice if you wreck out, if you have a hardware problem that logs you out, or you can't drive a leg and it times you out, you're at least not completely out of the rally. You can still continue on. And that's incredibly important. Now, not all rallies support Super Rally, but those that do make it a little bit more fun for the entire crew to be able to make a mistake and still carry on. You can actually see the description, the creator, the damage model. You see here, pace note audio is the only thing allowed when the rally opens, when it closes. And for most rallies, that's going to be a week. Certain championships, rallies can be open for a couple of weeks or longer, depending upon what the administrators have allowed for that group. And then, of course, the car groups that are allowed are defined as well. So, our Porsche SC 3.0 is in group 4. So, wow, this is good. We can actually drive this. And so if we decide that we wanted to drive it, we would come up here. Actually, once you're down in these stages, you have to use the left arrow to get back up to the top. You go down and you're actually in the stages menu. So just know that you can go up and down and see all your stages, but then you have to left arrow to get back up. And here you would hit enter to start, and you would then be asked to specify the car and all the different questions around setting up the rally. Now, this is great. You see here for the different stages, it's giving you the name of the stage, it's giving you the length, it's giving you the surface type, the weather, and the default tire. Now, you see the tire and setup in the far column on the right, and here it says yes, yes. That means that the driver has the option to select their own tire choice and setup here. And so that's nice, you know. So let's say you've got a stage where you've got it starts off on dry tarmac, but then transitions to wet tarmac. You may look at the distance and you may decide that you want to drive conservatively, so you'll take the hit, and instead of choosing tarmac dry for that first stage, you will go on ahead and choose your wets or intermediates so that you're better prepared to drive the wet stage. So you're compromising. So you'll see here, you know, you've got the first stage, you can select your tires and your setup, but then the second and third stage, you cannot select either. So you have to continue on with what you chose for that first stage for the subsequent two. And then get to the second leg and you get a choice again for what you can choose in terms of tire. And it kind of goes along, and the administrator has control over that. You also have intervening roadside service of varying times, 5, 10, 15 minutes, typically for roadside service. In between legs is usually where you see a service park. That's a longer and more specified number of mechanics that are available to you to work on your car. Because as you drive, you're going to encounter damage. You're going to have bodywork problems. You may damage the radiator. You may hit a rock and damage a damper, or worse, you can crack the windshield. All sorts of really cool stuff can happen in the car. And so these roadside services and service parks allow you to repair the car. You have a set amount of time that's allowed. If you go over that time, you get a time penalty. So you can go over, and I think that it's got some boundaries to where, like, if you're less than a minute over, you may not get a penalty. But if you go over a minute past the allotted time, you get dinged, and that can vary anything from having uh, uh, a really small 10-second penalty up to multiple minutes added to your time as a result of that. But nice, because you're never out of a rally. You keep driving on and persevere and repair the car as you go. But you'll be driving a damaged car some of the time, almost guaranteed in any rally. Very few people make it through unscathed. This is how you access it to actually drive it. But very infrequently will I leverage this to pick a rally and drive it. I use the website for that. So let's go in and check that out. So this is back at the RallySimFans webpage, and this is the section that lists the online rallies. And the banner to get here from the homepage is up here, Center Online Rally. And so here we've got all the rallies that are going on, and you got the same color coding that we got in the actual game itself in the online rally section. And we can drill down into these a little bit differently. So here we can actually come down here and we'll find our flyby rally again. So the reason why I actually like coming in here is it's a better representation of what you actually have to choose from. If you click down into this, you actually get into any description of the rally. So the Flyby Rally Club, they actually publish their Discord here, so you can actually join their Discord and have conversations with them, learn about the upcoming rallies, etc. And then you can get a nice table view of the setup. You can see this in the game as well, but I just like the layout a little bit better here, especially if I'm just browsing for a rally to participate in. You'll see here, this I don't see in the online rally in the RBR, is whether or not Super Rally is enabled. So here we can actually see this, that we've got Super Rally enabled. So back to what I was saying there is that, you know, if we crash out in stage 2, we take a default time with a penalty for stage 2 and stage 3, but we're allowed to re-enter and run in leg 2. And that's kind of nice. Here we get the full list of all the cars. We can see it a little bit easier here. And administrators can put different start and end boundaries on different legs. So if they want people to actually come closer to actually finishing the overall rally around the same time, they'll put a boundary on the final leg that makes it makes it so. Sometimes they'll just put a single stage in a final leg to confine that to a single day so that everybody finishes the final rally, and it's kind of a big buildup. The other thing that's kind of cool here is we actually get a nice tabular view, and we can see more here. So we can see the tire setup choice options here and the set tire also here. So nice. You can also see results here. So if you click in, you can see the results of a rally. And this is useful to see like overall who's winning the rally. You've got 11 participants that have completed the rally so far. If we go back to the rally description, something that we can actually see here that's kind of nice is we can see that 27 people started this rally, but only 11 people have completed it thus far. Now that can mean a couple of different things. It can mean people abandoned the rally, decided it wasn't for them, and that happens quite a bit. People wreck out, get irritated, and decide that they don't want to continue on. But also, too, anybody that has started the rally and hasn't actually gone all the way through all 3 legs and all 9 stages will still be in some sort of state. So they're not retired, they're kind of semi-retired until they complete the entire rally. So here we only have 11 people that have completed it. So when we look here again, we can actually see on the stage here, we can't see the times yet because the rally is not complete. So it keeps that private. It only shows the distances from. So I don't know if that keeps people from trying to target a particular time. I'm not really sure what the logic is there, but regardless, the rallies, you don't see the times until it's actually complete. But you do see over here who super rallied and how many stages they got the default penalty time for. Typically what administrators will do, and we can actually go back here and look at the rally description, and it may actually say, and it does not. So I believe that it's a default that the default time is 150% of the default time set for the stage. And so you can see that. So if we go back here to the rally description and we see like ban off, right? It's a 12.7K run. And if we go to stages and we go stage and we go ban off, Okra, 12.7 kilometers. So the default time is 10 minutes, 55 seconds. So a super rally typically will be 150% of that time. So it'd be like 15, 16 minutes, give or take. That's how the penalty goes. So you'll see a bunch of people have, that default time. That's what that actually means, is that they super rallied. And so when we were back here looking at that rally, we saw the results here. Each one of these stages, they will have taken that 150% time on that stage as a penalty and added to their time. So you see 3 people at the top haven't super rallied. You see one person here, he didn't super rally, but you have somebody here that has 3 stages that they took the default time on and still beat the guy that actually completed the rally cleanly. That happens. That's rally. Means that this guy was probably driving cautiously and not very fast. And this person was a much faster driver, had an incident that caused them to basically throw out 3 whole stages, which basically is an entire leg. We also get an interesting thing here is we can actually see, let's say you completed leg 1, all 3 stages, and you want to see where you are compared to where people were when they completed it. You can come up here to the leg and click on that, and then it shows you the entire list of competitors based on that first leg. And so you can see where you finish. You can also see all the different, 9 people that super rallied because that's over here marked. And that's quite nice. That's quite cool. And you can also get that by class. So you can actually drill in and see who is competing in your class. But you can do that all along. As you kind of go along and progress through the different stages, you can see what the leaderboard is for that stage. And it's kind of a nice thing. It's like, let's say you only drove, the first 2 legs and you're saving the 3rd leg. You don't want to spoil and see, who's super rallied out and so on and so forth. You want to see how you compare. So the results after the stage are the total results over here. And these are the times for the actual stage, or the positions for that particular stage. Once the rally is complete, you'll get final standings, and that will be more like what we looked at before, which is the full list here. I think that covers it. the types of rallies in the system, legs, stages, penalties for super rally. Accessing it in the game is pretty straightforward as well. But again, I typically will find my rallies here first to make sure I actually know what's going on with them, and then I will join them once I've confirmed that I'm selecting the right one and the right car and the right setup and the right tires, and then I'll drive my rally. Pretty cool. Next thing we'll be talking about is cool online resources for custom pace note packs and co-driver voices. And ultimately, we're going to get to talking about painting your rally car, which is possible in Richard Burns Rally. So look forward to that. As we said earlier, pace notes are an incredibly important aspect of rallying, whether you're sim rallying or rallying in real life. Having good pace notes is a critical key to success in driving fast. So the default pace notes in RBR are functionally okay. They're usually provided by the creators of the stages, but they're oftentimes incomplete. Intentionally so in most cases, is that they are expecting people to maybe use their pace notes as a general kind of feel overview, and then will ultimately recce the drive, the stage themselves, and create their own pace notes that are more customized to their driving style and what they actually need to have called out as part of the drive. So if you want more complete pace notes, you do need to install additional pace note packs. And kind of the state of the art, as far as I understand it currently, are the Lupus pace notes. And so if you go to Lupus RBR, blogspot.com, so LUPPIS RBR blogspot.com, you'll get to this page that we're looking at here. And so he's got a nice little welcome, so on and so forth. And Yane is amazing. He has his own pace notes as well that he publishes. I'm not going to his website just now, but he also has a voice pack that works with Lupus Notes. I'm choosing to showcase Lupus Notes because that's what I use, and I use it primarily because it's what Jake at GP Laps uses. And so I watched a lot of his videos and I liked the calls that he was getting, and I liked the editability of them and stuff. They seemed really complete for everything he drove, and he was happy with them. So until, of course, he started doing his own pace notes, which is a whole other thing. Long story short, I downloaded and started using Lupus pace notes, and I've actually been quite pleased with them. The installation, you can click here on installation, and he goes through very detailed instructions and what you need to be doing. He talks about his V2 pack and his V3 pack. You do want the V3 pack because that's kind of state of the art in terms of what you want to be using. And then he walks through what you're going to be doing in terms of download, install, and even includes some videos that you can use to understand the whole process a little bit better. The other thing that you want is the pace notes themselves are great, and but you need to, if you download the V3 pack, you need to have voice mods that support the calls that are being made here. And so if you look at co-driver mods, again, you probably don't want to do V2, so we'll look at the co-driver 3D, the V3 mods. Of course, a lot of different languages, so if English is your thing, there are a lot of really good voice mods that will use the Lupus V3 notes, including DDF Racer's new set. DDF Racer, he's a cool guy. He does some really cool sim racing events in a lot of different sims, but he's also a big RBR advocate. Jane Lahinen is a luminary among sim racing rallyists. He is really, really good, very, very funny guy, and does a lot of really good videos. He is Finnish, which makes perfect sense. If you're a rally fan at all, that just saying that, you almost kind of would have assumed. I said he was, a great rallyist. He's probably Finnish. And he has some good English voices. He also has Finnish voices as well. Nikki Grist by Beneficial is another kind of British, I think it's a Britishy sort of voice. There's Robert Starr, which is also, I think, a British kind of voice, but just a different timbre in the voice, a little bit deeper, and you can hear him pretty well. My personal favorite that I actually use is Rita Full On, also by Beneficial, and it's a fictional. All three of these by Beneficial are fictional voices, and Rita Full On is a New Zealander, so a Kiwi. And I can just hear her over the engine rumble. It's a different tone, so different frequency. And so I can key on her without having to have her blaring in my ear. There's some videos to kind of get examples of all of these before you download them. And the links to download them are in the descriptions of the videos. So you can get them directly through that. Very, very cool. There is one other co-driver that by default had always worked with the V2 Lupus notes. That's Darren, RBR Darren. And he's referenced on Lupus's page, but he's not listed in the V3 because they just released the V3 beta that's available through the Discord channel. So you can subscribe to the Discord channel and download that. And this is, at least with the V2 Lupus notes, was the most comprehensive set of voice recordings available. So all of the different calls and different stuff, and even some additional like attaboys at the end or funny commentary when you'd wreck, etc. All part of the Darren voice pack. British voice, very understandable though, and so very articulate, and definitely worth giving a look to if you're interested in that, and having a little bit more color around some of the calls. Darren is definitely interesting. I think that there's some flavor mods. What are these? Yeah, so these are extra words. So you can download, with no flavor, half flavor, distance flavor only, full flavor. So some interesting stuff here in terms of the capabilities of the voice mods. Darren is definitely a cut above many of the others. And now that he's got the V3 beta, maybe worth trying out. But that is voice mods for co-drivers and pacenotes packs. There's only really one pacenote pack that I'm aware of. Yane also has some, but I've not looked at his website. I'm not really sure if I have to find a video of his to find the pacenote pack, or if he's got a website. But he's got a great YouTube channel. He definitely has a lot of really funny videos that can give you overviews on a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, and will provide much, much greater detail than I ever could, including a very, very cool video on using the RBR Roadbook, which is an application that you can download to connect an OBS video to the note editor, and can then watch yourself, and you can actually leave yourself audio notes or make calls as you're driving, and then come back into the notebook and record the calls that you want to have in your pace notes. And that's pretty cool. So he's got some really cool videos about how to recce, how he does his recce's, and some of the tools that he uses that are quite useful. So hopefully that's enough on pacenote packs and co-driver voices. Now we're going to talk a little bit about painting your rally car, and so definitely stay tuned for that. So you want to paint your rally car, do you? Well, you can do that in Richard Burns Rally and the RallySimFans. If you go to rbrtemplates.blogspot.com, you will get a list of all car templates as of mid-December last year. So you can scroll down, find the car that you're looking for. And like in my case, I like the Group 4 Porsche SC. So I'm going to download this. It's going to take me to a MediaFire site. Don't panic. This is actually quite common. People don't always have hosting accounts for storing files. And so MediaFire and others will subsidize the storage and delivery of files with a little bit of advertising you're just going to have to deal with and move on. So that's fine. Not a big deal. This is going to come to you by way of a RAR file. And so you'll see there's a RAR file here. Careful note, I would be irresponsible to not call this out. If you are a WinRAR user, because you have that tool for other things, I know it's popular amongst the sim racing community for opening up all sorts of archives from Assetto Corsa, for RBR, for other sorts of things. You do want to go to the WinRAR site and get the latest update. There is a exploit in the WinRAR application that can cause some really bad problems, basically allowing for an archive to overwrite some stuff, and it isn't easily detectable. So definitely update, make sure that you're doing the right thing there. And so this RAR file is actually a Photoshop design file, which you can open up in a lot of different editors, including GIMP, including Photopea, which is an online video editor, which I've covered before in doing liveries for iRacing. So once you open this file, you get this, right? And it's got different layers in it, which include the shader layer. You've got a scrape layer that basically puts, detritus on the car as if you've been driving the rally, which the game will automatically use this livery once you've driven a little ways. You've got a sticker layer, a number layer, a whole bunch of different things that basically give you general areas that you can use for laying out your basic livery. Now, once you get a livery that you like, after you've got everything, set up the way you want it, whether you're putting stickers on the car, you're putting numbers on the car, you're probably not going to use the defaults, but you get the placement of them kind of nicely done. You will export the car. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So if you go to Save Copy in Photoshop, you can come down to a drop down and you want to look for DDS. Now, you will not find DDS on your Photoshop or on your GIMP or anything else unless you've installed the NVIDIA texture tools, because this is a special format that is ultra compressed and specially designed for gaming, especially older games. So this is a format that you'll want to export to. Once you've selected this, you'll give the file a name, and you'll say save. And we'll say yes. Okay, that's fine. And it's going to bring up a map here. And so this is where you want to make sure that you're selecting BC3 DXT5, and you want to set the highest compression possible. And then you'll save the file, and it's over here on the right hand side. And when you save that file, it will be available to you, and you can drop it into the appropriate place. If you look at the RBR installation, we drive down into this, we'll actually find a cars folder. And so each one of the cars has its own folder. So we'll scroll down here and we will find the Porsche SC. It's not the Group B, so it's just the SC. And in here we'll find skins, default, textures, and this is where the files live. And so there are 4 primary files that you need to be concerned about. There's the SC external, SC external scrape, the SC internal, and the SC internal scrape. Now, those files are pretty much identical to one another, with the one exception of the scrape overlay. The layer that I showed you in the PDF is something that you will select for the 2 scrapes. So the internal scrape and external scrape, at least in my car installation, are identical to one another, as are the external, internal without the scrape. But those 4 files, the external scrape, internal scrape, are the 4 primary files that you need to create DDS files for. You need to drop them into this folder, and then you need to, in your RallySimFans launcher, come into My Cars and select the car, and you want to make sure that your skin preview is correct and you want to apply it. And this just kind of resets things and gets it to where it actually shows up in the game. I'm not sure if there's a way to do this other than this, but you can actually import skins and do things here as well. But if you modify them yourself, you don't download a skin pack, which there are skin packs available. I just use this to basically set it up to actually use the skin correctly, and everything is good. And then your car shows up all pretty and liveried up the way you will like it. And it's not a necessary feature. It's not something that you absolutely have to do. It's a nice to have. especially if you're streaming or recording and you want those cutscenes to show your customized livery or customized car when you're driving the rally, and also for your replays, etc. Well, that's about all I know about painting your rally car. You can find a lot of other resources online that will tell you more about what you can do, but that's the basics. So if you know how to use Photoshop, GIMP, or Photopea, you can actually do some pretty cool stuff, create some nice overlays, put some patterns on your car, and call it a day. Hope this has been informative and useful for you. Thank you for joining me, and happy rallying. Bye now.